Hello and good evening and welcome back for another round of World Talks here on TVP World. My name is Don Arleth. After the historic argument and shouting match in the Oval Office, many worry about what's next for Ukraine. And now joining me to discuss the next steps towards a peace deal is Kateryna Shynkaruk, a non-resident scholar at Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Hello, and thank you very much for joining me tonight. I appreciate it. I'd like to just start off with a little reminder for our viewers of how this all went down last night, so let's take a look.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's exactly what you're doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. If you didn't have our military equipment, if you didn't have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days. I heard it from Putin. In 3 days.
You got to be more thankful. Because let me tell you, you don't have the cards. With us, you have the cards. But without us, you don't have any cards.
Mr. President, is there will be Mr. President, is the deal off?
Now, Ms. Shynkaruk, please tell me, this meeting was moving along, it seemed to be going along well, and then it just kind of exploded. What do you think went wrong, and where do you place the blame?
Well, the blame game is probably not the most constructive tactics right now, but obviously we could see how disadvantaged President Zelenskyy was in his position, being attacked by two hosts, being a guest, non-native speaker, and I will abstain from asserting that this was staged, but this is the basically scenario that looks most probable in the given circumstances, and the choreography of Vice President Vance and President Trump's remarks, and basically passing the ball to each other. But even if we put aside the question whether this was prepared or this was a spontaneous development, we can say that definitely there was a failure of goodwill to continue the conversation, and the Ukrainian delegation still was hoping for some developments by the end of Friday. And President Zelenskyy went on Fox News and made very diplomatic comments about how thankful he was and how he regretted about the meeting going so unexpectedly, in such an unexpected direction, but nothing really happened. And then we've seen the social media post by President Trump, which could be considered as a signal that the next step of the U.S. government is a serious consideration of cutting all aid and support to Ukraine in order to coerce it into a more compliant negotiation position.
Right, which begs the question at this point, what does President Zelenskyy do next? I know he's in London right now. He just met with Keir Starmer. He will have this emergency summit, which will take place tomorrow. But it seems, if we look at, for instance, Mark Rutte today, and he has the nickname as the Trump whisperer, if you will. He knows how to deal with President Donald Trump. He says, I think Zelenskyy should find a way to restore his relationship with President Trump. Well, with that being said, how exactly should he do this?
Well, we know that ironically, there was no one with expertise from the region on basically the regional expertise on Russia, Ukraine in the room. We haven't seen General Kellogg in the room, but my point is that if someone in the negotiation team on Russia, Ukraine has some experience more than others on the military developments in Ukraine and the Russia's invasion of Ukraine, that would be probably General Kellogg. And it would be helpful for Ukrainian government right now to consider appointing a counterpart to General Kellogg. And it would be a sign of goodwill on the side of the US government to allow this conversation to continue and maybe do some first initial diplomatic steps to bridge the gap that we have seen created yesterday. There's still a lot of hope that this is not a burned completely bridge. And I personally expect Europeans, European Union leadership, NATO leadership, as you mentioned, Secretary General Rutte, to also contribute to the diplomatic efforts to make the parties return to some sort of a conversation, maybe not among the presidents, but among team members.
Now, are you concerned that, and maybe Ukrainians, it seems certainly that President Zelenskyy is, that President Trump is trying to pursue peace in Ukraine, get a peace deal at any price, potentially leaving the door open to a reignited conflict just as long as it's not on his watch? And well, how real of a threat is that right now, based on what we're seeing from the talking points that the White House is using, and well, the approach that they're taking to this peace process?
Well, we see a very real threat of complete reorientation of American foreign policy, and the first steps were made last week with some accusations of Ukraine being provoking or even initiating the war. Then we've seen developments quite alarming in the United Nations, with for the first time over several decades, United States aligning with China and Russia in its UN resolutions in the General Assembly and Security Council. All these are indicators that there is no political will to put any pressure on the Russian government, but rather to appease it into some sort of negotiation where Putin is expected to show goodwill for ceasefire. And if there is no credible deterrence on the table, obviously, this ceasefire will hold as long as Putin goodwill holds, which, is, as we could see, is quite fragile. So there is definitely a need for credible deterrence, which Ukraine frames as security guarantees that have been seen by Trump administration as something deeply secondary, if not tertiary. So if there is a real seriousness about having this peace outlast at least for several months or years, then we have to be serious about explaining to the US government, maybe talking, as I said, to some team members, the root causes of the invasion and why Ukrainians are seeing appeasement of Putin as suicidal. So technically, it's not only just from the point of view of emotions, but also from the point of view of pragmatic calculus. Ukrainian delegation has no alternative as to ask for security guarantees or for deterrence, because a capitulation that would follow a ceasefire without any deterrence or without any, credible security umbrella over Ukraine, that capitulation not need, a lengthy mediation. Ukraine could announce it on its own.
This emergency summit that's coming up tomorrow, what are your expectations? What do you think the road ahead is going to look like from the European side? I know there's a lot of European leaders have sounded off in support of President Zelenskyy. The problem and the complexity is well understood here in Europe. So what do you think we're going to get out of tomorrow's emergency summit and the path forward?
Well, it's just the beginning of a serious conversation. Hopefully that it will go beyond just statements. And the next important stage will be a conversation scheduled for March 6th among the European Union members. Basically, we need to understand that this was a wake-up call already in Munich by Vice President J.D. Vance's speech. What happened yesterday in the Oval Office is just a finalization of that wake-up call for those who may have misinterpreted it a couple of weeks ago in Munich. So basically, Europe needs to get serious about its own defense and security. And not only for Ukraine's sake, but obviously for the sake of European and European security. There is hope still that something more tangible may come up out of these meetings. There's also important caveat here is not to only focus on ceasefire and European peacekeepers as a function of this ceasefire, but have a broader conversation of basically self-sufficiency to a degree in European security architecture.
Well, let's certainly hope that, sometimes when one door closes, another door opens. Let's certainly hope that that's the case and that we can find some resolution to this diplomatic kerfuffle, if you will, at the moment. I thank you very much for joining me, Kateryna Shynkaruk. I messed up your name at the very beginning, but thank you very much. A non-resident senior scholar at Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And that concludes this edition of World Talks. Thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful evening and stick around because world news is coming up soon.